G'day and welcome to another episode of Spectrum Uncensored. Today I have with me Stacey from South Gippsland in Victoria. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your children and what they've been diagnosed with and when.
Yeah, so I have a currently 10-year-old. He was diagnosed around 3.5, 4 with ASD. He then went on to get a diagnosis of anxiety as well as intellectual disability. And I have a 1.5-year-old. He's currently being seen for possible ADHD and sensory processing. There's a possibility that there might be some ASD there, but everything's just sort of too early to tell at this stage.
So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, my son's very similar. He's 10 as well. So and he was diagnosed about 2.5 years old, but he was diagnosed originally with autism and sensory processing disorder, and then when he was about 5, he got diagnosed with ADHD. So it's definitely a process and a journey trying to work it all out. And yeah, a lot of it like overlaps. So you don't really know exactly what's at play until they age, pretty much.
Definitely. With my oldest, I didn't really start seeing the signs very early. I guess I didn't really know what I was looking for being a first-time mum. And then, I saw like OCD signs, and then I was kind of like, oh, maybe that. And then, like the more that I learned about it, the more I was like, oh, yeah.
Did you have much experience with autism and things like that before your kids were diagnosed? Like, were you really aware of it, or, what to look for and things like that? Or
almost none. I hadn't been around kids. I was a young mum, so I had my first when I was 20, and I only had one friend that had kids at that age. So it was just something I hadn't really been around. And being a 90s baby, it wasn't really in schools like talked about yet. So I'm definitely learning more and more as I go. But I ended up working in disability support after I had him. So I've learned a lot now. Yeah.
What is school like for your eldest? Obviously, your youngest isn't in school yet, but what kind of challenges and things have you faced with schooling, for example? I'd say it's different for everyone, but I find that school tends to be the biggest kind of challenge for kids once they hit that age.
Yeah. We found like the very first year was actually really good for him because kinder was quite full on and loud and rowdy and just chaotic going into school, and he sort of had that structure for each day. That was really, really good for him until he had a substitute teacher. And then, we went through, obviously with COVID and stuff, that stop-start. So that really threw him quite a lot. And he's definitely had challenges making friends and keeping friends. There has been bullying issues and stuff like that as well that we're working on. But we moved house 4 months ago, and just that transition to a new school has been an absolute nightmare. We've really, really struggled with that change in routine and location and stuff.
I mean, any change is hard, so it is, and it's even more so for our kids, that routine change, that structure change, changes in environments and things like that. And I guess it's a big adjustment for any kid, moving a house, moving school. So it's just like our kids have that added extra layer of complexity about them with that stuff, and it's really tricky to try and navigate that. I find that I get terrified of change. Like, I don't want to rock the boat, and I just want to keep it how it is, because at least I know what it is if I can keep it that way. But I always say that there's only one thing scarier than change, and that's no change, because you can't progress and you can't improve without change. So it's really one of those catch-22 situations.
Yes.
But yeah. And your eldest is verbal?
Yeah, so he had very, very limited speech up until around about school. And then it all kind of came together for him. We did lots and lots of speech therapy and OT early on. So basically, at 3, we started speech therapy for about 6 months or so before he got the diagnosis. And yeah, we've actually been able to stop having to go to speech therapy about 1.5 years ago. We called it and said it's really no longer needed. So that was incredible.
That in itself is a massive accomplishment, not having to do the therapies and things like that anymore, because often these things can be lifelong, depending on the child and what they face and things like that. So I feel like early intervention is very important. A lot of people don't put much weight behind that, but for our kids, I find that you have to be like 10 years in front, like thinking about 10 years in the future. People are like, why are you thinking about high school? They're only 2, and it's like, but you really do have to forward think for everything, and it's quite exhausting. Like, if there's a lot of problem solving involved, and a lot of these kids struggle a lot with sleep and things. So you're sleep deprived, they're sleep deprived, and that can cause behavioral problems, and it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably my biggest challenge now, with the youngest one. So he's, I guess they classify nonverbal at this point. He makes a couple of noises and like a lot of jargon, but there's only like 2 words and they're not really directed at anything. And when you're waking up 30 times a night and have been, every single night since they were born, you're just like, I'm constantly in like therapy mode, and there's just, there's no shut off, but it's, when you know that there's potential that it's going to end up helping the kids in the long run, you just kind of push through and go, oh, it's worth it, it's worth it, it's worth it.
Yeah, and I find we're constantly in this fight or flight mode of like, I don't know, like your identity completely changes when you have a child, but then once you start discovering that they have disabilities and things like that, it's a massive change again in your way of thinking. But then it's a massive lifestyle change too. As I say, having a kid is a massive lifestyle change, but yeah, when they have a disability, and I mean, you've got 2 kids. No, that's okay.
We're just cracking the phone now. I'm like, okay.
Checking it all out.
Yeah. Sorry, continue.
It's all right. I don't mind. You can help with the camera work. I find that when as I say, you've got 2 kids. I've only got the one. I always say that my kid's like a 3-in-1 situation. He is off the charts, but I think everyone can relate to that to some extent. I don't have that. Obviously, having multiple children means you're dealing with dynamic as well between the 2 of them, whereas I don't have that issue with an only child. But yeah, I find that we lose ourselves a little bit with
yeah, definitely.
We lose ourselves a little bit with this kind of stuff, because we're living for the children.
Yeah.
Always anyway, but I find like that it becomes our whole sole purpose in life, trying to, better their futures and ensure that they, can cope with everyday life. It's quite, it's all consuming. I don't think people realise just how, even when they're not with us and they're at school or they're doing something different, you're still thinking about them and what you can do to help them, and, what's next and all that kind of thing. So
no, absolutely. And making appointments with the school and making appointments for therapy and trying to navigate all that. And and we've got camp coming up. And so then it's, you sit there and go, oh, how's camp going to work? And, and then they go on camp, and the whole time it's just like, Are they giving them foods that they're going to eat? You know, is my child going to come home and break down because camp was horrible? It is really just, it's constantly on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, even just going to camp, that's a massive accomplishment. Like that's something that's amazing. Like I hope that my kid can get to that stage. But yeah, like he's got swimming coming up with school. It's supposed to be on Friday, but you know, it looks like we're going to have rain anyway. But just like, oh, he can go on the bus with school to the swimming pool, and I'm like, oh, he's never done that before. So just little things like that. It's such simple stuff, but you're thinking about. We tend to focus on all the things that could go wrong instead of like all the things that could go right. But you're just so used to planning for the worst because if you don't, you're going to get stuck. And it's the same with things like holidays. I recently went on a cruise with my husband and my son, and we've been on cruises before with him when he was very small. So it was really easy to wrangle him, kind of like, you know, what you're doing with your little one. You can pick him up, you can, you know, surfboard hold him to get out of somewhere. And so we've always planned holidays in a way that it's like, okay, we need a plan B, we need an escape plan if things go south. So when we went on the cruise, we just did not have that. It was absolutely terrifying. Once you're on there, you're stuck on there. And it was for 10 days, I think, or 10 nights, something like that. Yeah. We went to different... Yeah, we went to different countries, you know, we went to Papua New Guinea. So, and I don't know what it's like with your kids, but I find that my son needs about 2 weeks to adjust to a new routine. So going on a holiday like that, he doesn't really have the opportunity to adjust to a new routine. So it's all very up and down. Like he wants to enjoy himself, but he doesn't quite know how to because it's something new. But we actually had an incident on the cruise ship on the last day where he must have been planning this the entire time. My son's a religious absconder and a runner. He's nonverbal, so a lot of it comes down to inability to communicate wants and needs and things like that. But he's also very like, we call him Slim Shady because he does a lot of shady stuff. But he just like, he knows what he wants and he'll work out a way to get it. But yeah, he'd been planning this grand escape for the entire holiday. And he ended up sneaking out onto the balcony. My husband was in the toilet. I was sitting on the bed and he went behind the curtain and I didn't hear him open that door, and that door is loud. So he's obviously done it very quietly, very slowly, you know. And he ended up scaling the side of the ship. He climbed across balconies. He went up a few stories on the ship, and he can't swim. So, I mean, if you fall overboard, even if you can swim, the potential for you not to be able to swim in those conditions is quite high anyway. But it was absolutely terrifying. And you don't have plan B in those kinds of situations. Like you do absolutely everything you can to keep them safe and give them those experiences. As you say, like camp, it's an experience and you want your kid to have that experience, but you sit there and you're freaking out about all the things that could go wrong. I don't think people realise how much trauma is involved with the journey as well. Like you love your kids, but there is a lot of trauma involved on a personal level and on a family level.
I feel that.
And it makes it's tiring, even if you exclude the lack of sleep and the sleep deprivation, all that kind of thing. It's an exhausting experience. So it's really nice to talk to other people that are having the exact same experiences. It's not, I guess when I say exactly the same, it is, but it isn't. Like everyone's different, but the bones of it are very similar.
I definitely agree because I've got and I love my friends dearly, and I would never ever hold it against them. But like, there's lots of people that just don't get it. And, you know, they invite you on all of these fun things to do, and they're like, oh, just bring your kids along. And it's like, I can't just bring my kids along. Like, it doesn't work like that. There is no just bring your kids.
We do. We sacrifice a lot, especially socially. I find that as time goes by, you find your people kind of thing, and the ones that do understand, they kind of become adopted family, and they're like, oh, yep, I always say I want to be invited, but I probably won't come. Like, you want to be included, but you want people to understand that, okay, I'm probably going to say no 9 times out of 10, but there could be that one time out of 10 that I'll say yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends and stuff now are quite accommodating. Like, they're like, oh, okay, well, let's go do dinner here because it's got a playground, or let's do, you know, it at a park, but we'll make sure it's fenced so that, you know, your kid can't just run off. So it's just like little accommodations. If people can, you're not spoiling that person, you're not spoiling those children by doing that. It's what they need to live the most equal lives that they can compared to everyone else. So it's, yeah, I get pretty annoyed when people say that you're spoiling him because you're giving him this, or it's like, no, it's like literally I'm giving him human rights. Like, it's just his version. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, yeah, so, I mean, you've got quite an age gap between your kids, so it's, we always talked about having more children, but once we found out our son's diagnosis, we decided not to. But I always thought in my mind, if we were ever going to have kids, there would be, I mean, originally we were like, oh, 2-year gap. But I don't know. Do you think that it's better that you've got a bigger gap? Like, was it more of like a wait and see how your older son goes before bringing in somebody else into the mix?
So the big gap was kind of a few things. So they've got different dads, which is probably the biggest point. I didn't intend on having any more, and then I met a partner that, you know, it was just one of those things where I'm like, we want to build a family together. And the diagnosis played a very, very big part in it as well, as did a little bit of birth trauma. So there was kind of all of those elements that I wasn't really intending on having another one. And then, there's positives and negatives. I think one of the, you know, the really big positives is that I'm not having to, you know, quite look after, you know, like 2 toddlers. Like, I wasn't breastfeeding and trying to, you know, run after a kid who was screaming at me going, mom. He can help out a little bit. Obviously, you know, he's not a typical 10-year-old, so he's still, you know, needs help with quite a few things. So the downside to it, I guess, is that I felt like I was really getting myself back finally. Just to have that, you know, purely devoted to a child again. So yeah, it's been a big adjustment for me. Like, definitely, I was back at work, and I was starting, because separated parents as well, he was doing every second weekend with his dad, so I was having me time, and now I have no me time.
I think that would be the thing I struggle with. Like, I don't think I could do it again. Like, people have gone, oh, you're going to have another one, all that kind of thing. But it's like, I don't think I could. Like, I'm literally like tapped out already. I don't think I could have another one. But I mean, you do what you have to do. And that's the thing. People always say, oh, I don't know how you do it. It's like, well, you know, with a lot of blood, sweat and tears, but I do it. Because like, you don't have a choice. Like, once, you know, it's not like a puppy dog that you're like, I can't take care of it, I'll rehome it. Like, you've got to just deal with, you know, with it as it comes. But I guess at least having the first child, you know what you're kind of in for. So I don't know, do you feel like you're better equipped as a parent for your second child in that you know what to look for and, you know, what interventions to put in place earlier?
Definitely. Yeah, I had no idea what I was looking for the first time around, and you know, to a few other people, it was blatantly obvious that my child had autism. And you know, I sort of went, oh, maybe there might be, and you know, and then it was like, okay, well, where do we go? What do we do? Whereas this time around, it was like, okay, my kid's not hitting this marker, and this marker. I'm going to make an appointment with the pediatrician. And people were like sort of in my ear being like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, because that's the steps that you need to take, and it's better, you know, to get onto it early. And I knew the wait lists were extreme because I was already going down those avenues. And, you know, we knew straight away, like, all right, let's get onto speech therapy and, you know, let's start calling some OTs and just get on wait lists, because I know that there's going to be quite an extensive amount of time. You know, I knew sort of, you know, how to go with NDIS applications and all of that sort of stuff once you've already been through it, because it's so confusing the first time around. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot the second time too, but you kind of know roughly what steps to go through.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have a more proactive approach, I guess, because you know what you're doing, you've done it before, so it's almost becomes like second nature. You know what needs to be filled out, you know what interventions you need to put into place and what therapies and things like that. So, I mean, our firstborn obviously makes us a mother, and then kind of guides us through parenthood, and it, like anything, you know, practice makes perfect. I mean, nothing's perfect, but you know what I mean. It's it's definitely, I feel like our kids do teach us a lot, and I'm always trying to help people that are just starting their journey, and I'm like, I look at them and go, oh, I remember when it was like that for me, and just wanting to help them and kind of guide them. Not in a sense that it's like telling them what to do, but just, you know, giving them little bits of information that I wish I'd had when it all first started for me. But
yeah, for sure.
My son regressed, so he started off normal, and then gradually he lost his speech, he lost his ability to do a lot of things. The only thing he didn't lose was walking, but he was blowing kisses and waving, and then just one day he stopped. So that was our sign, is something's not quite right. But yeah, I mean, I look back at how far we've come, and it's massive. And you don't take anything for granted. You celebrate every little milestone. They actually teach you to live in the moment and just be grateful for just the little tiny things. And I think that's what I'm probably most thankful and grateful for, is they teach you patience too. If you told me 10 years ago I'd be this patient, I would have laughed you out of the room. But
no, they do definitely teach.
Definitely a journey.
And they do definitely teach how to be grateful for the little things. Like, you know, the other day we had our colour run at school, and I was just going, no, he's not going to like that. And so we put in some preparations with the teachers and stuff, and they were like, you'll be able to go through like the run but go around the station so that you're not getting the powder on you. And, you know, out of, I think the kids did about 30 laps or something, my son did one lap and came out of it crying, and we went, yeah, you know, well done, you did one lap. But at the end of like his one lap, they took him over and he sat down and got to choose the music that was playing through the speakers. And he ended up with a big smile on his face. And I walked away going, that was a great success. And to anybody else, they'd be like, what do you mean that was a great success? But to me, it was like, he did one lap and we're driving home in the car with a smile on his face. That's success.
Yeah, and it changes your perspective on what success is.
Yeah.
So, and it is. It's and that sounds like he's got great support too, which is very important. And that people are noticing those things and know how to react to those situations and help the child regulate and things like that. Again, it must be the time for colour runs because my son's got his on Saturday with school, so wish me luck. But
I hope that goes up.
we'll see how it pans out. But do you have any advice for parents that have a newly diagnosed child that I mean, obviously we don't know what we're doing in the beginning, so what would you say to somebody that's just starting out?
So the most important thing, I think, when I first got that diagnosis, is I got in the car and I broke down in tears. And then I thought about it and I was like, do you know what? It does not change who my child is at all. Like, a diagnosis is just a word that they put over the top of who your child is already. They are the exact same person that walked out of the room as the person that walked into the room. And the only difference that it makes is that they are able to then get the supports that can help them. And I think that sort of leads on then, take all the support you can get. There's phone numbers to call. I ring Parents Helpline probably once a month just to be like, bleh. There's the speechies and the OTs and the psychs and NDIS and, I'm going through Orange Door, support services at the moment, just to have someone else that's there for me. And, those places are there. And I think just accept all the help you can get, because it's hard and it's exhausting and it's confusing and, yeah.
Well, I love that because we're constantly thinking about how to support our child, but never thinking about how to support ourselves. We always that kind of goes by the wayside. So I love that. That's some good advice, because you need to support yourself too through the process. It's grueling and it's time consuming and it's sleep depriving. So you definitely have to have your own support as well, as your child's support. But thank you very much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate you coming in and chatting with me, and it's been really, really lovely to hear your story and meet the little one. He's definitely his little star.
Yeah.
But
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate being on here.
Take care.
Thank you.